There we go. So welcome everybody. This is a webinar about how solar businesses can respond to the anti-net metering petition before FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. My name is Glenn Brand. I am the Director of Policy and Advocacy for Solar United Neighbors, and I'm based here in DC. But as you all know, we have state programs around the country. Next slide, please. Very quickly, I'll go through a little more of the logistics on the call. I'll go through the introductions and then turn it over to our Executive Director, Anya Schoolman. Then I'll be back to talk about the petition, the background and what we think are the likely impacts and what lawyers are telling us. And then I'll turn it over to my colleague, Liz Veazey, who will talk about what solar installers can do in this effort. And then we'll end up with Q&A. And all three of us will handle that. So next slide, please. Again, to ask questions, you can always type your questions in the chat feature of Zoom at any point throughout the webinar. That's in the center of the screen. There's at the very bottom. I will let you know that all webinar registrants will receive an email after the webinar with a link to view a recording of the webinar and other information that we mentioned as follow-up during this call. If you're having any technical difficulties during the webinar, just post to chat and we'll do what we can to address them. Next slide, please. So again, I introduced myself. I would like to introduce Liz Veazey first. She is our solar advocacy campaigner, and together Liz and I work on providing support for advocacy efforts on solar, particularly rooftop solar and distributed generation in general, all around the country, but in particular with our states where we have active state programs. Also on the call and next to speak will be our Executive Director and Founder, Anya Schoolman, who is also based in DC. Next slide, please. So I'll turn it over to Anya at this point.
Thanks, Glenn, and hello, everybody. I really appreciate everybody joining us today. This is a really important issue, and I really welcome the opportunity to talk to you about it. I'm just going to briefly share a little bit of background about Solar United Neighbors. For those of you who may or may not know us well, we really believe in our theory of change, and our theory of change is really about a cycle that happens over and over and over again. And every time we go through this cycle, this solar industry and the solar market and the number of people with rooftop solar gets bigger and broader and more diverse. And so our theory is that we help people go solar through our co-ops, through good customer education, through referrals, through training, through the National Solar Home Tour. We build a community of solar supporters, and we do that with our congresses, with our webinars, with our Sun Scout program, and happy hours, all sorts of events, community events, tabling at the local farmers market, you name it. And then we mobilize rooftop owners to fight for better policy. And as those of you who are engaged in policy know that that's a complicated process, and that the grassroots engagement is just a piece of it, but we think it's an important piece that really can influence public service commissions, legislators, and even the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So, and then every time we do it and succeed, we have more solar owners and more solar and a bigger industry, and we do it again. And so we're inviting you today to join one of those epic cycles where we've gone solar, we're joining together, and we're going to fight for our energy rights. Next slide. I guess there's just a couple words about how industry fits, because as you all know, we're not an industry association. We're an association of solar owners. We represent the customer side, but the solar industry and solar installers are critical to us. Your success is our success. It's one of the ways we measure that we are having a good impact. And you are also, of course, critical in terms of policy and advocacy. You're the jobs component. You're what the elected officials care about, and you're compelling and important spokespeople for the industry. So you're our partners, our stakeholders, and there's many ways that we engage with industry, and we want to invite you to really explore all those ways. So I'll come back at the end to that. But mostly, I just want to thank you for taking a few minutes out from your busy day in doing the solar install work to think about getting involved in the larger policy framework. Next slide. And solar rights, there's a lot of different ways to talk about solar rights, and we don't pretend to have the be all and end all definitive version of this, but we wanted to put this here to talk about some of the ways that we look at it and articulate it. And we want to make clear that for us, solar rights is not a partisan issue. It goes across political and economic spectrum. We really believe in a world where every single person in America can have access either directly or indirectly to solar, whether it's on their own roof or through community solar. And that it's really part and parcel of energy democracy and making your own energy choices. So we believe in a competitive market without monopoly interference or limits on the market. And we believe that net metering in some version is central to our energy rights, that it's not fair that we produce something valuable, which is electricity, and that we don't get compensated fairly for it. And this fight is really about making sure that we are not robbed of this value, of this property right that we're investing our own money in. And I think that's enough. We can talk, maybe in the Q&A, we could debate this a little bit more. Now I think I'm handing it over to talk about what we're facing today. This is the next slide. That's Glenn, right?
Yes. So I wanted to start by giving just the basic background of what the petition is all about. In April, the New England Ratepayers Association, and their acronym is NERA. This is a front group for utility interest. They filed a petition with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. From now on, I'll refer to as FERC. And the deadline initially was earlier this month, but it was extended upon request from a lot of organizations, including Solar Neighbors. So the public deadline for comments is June 15th. Some people are interested in finding out more about the New England Ratepayers Association, or NERA. I can direct people to the Energy and Policy Institute's research on this, and that the link to that is right there. And I think Liz just posted it on the chat function as well, so you can click on it. It's suffice to say that NERA is a somewhat shadowy and opaque group. We don't know exactly who funds them. We don't know exactly who their members are. They refuse to disclose. We do know they have a history of opposing net metering in the northern New England states, and they're the ones behind this effort. So, you may be hearing more. There's some groups that are pressing hard to find out who funds them and who exactly is behind the petition and this organization. But right now, what we know is pretty much summarized in that link to the Energy and Policy Institute. Liz, can you make that the whole thing visible? It's cut off a little on the bottom there, or maybe that's just the way it is. Basically, NERA's petition, this is a quote from a news article, makes the case that any behind the meter or customer sided energy generation is a wholesale sale subject to FERC jurisdiction. Next slide. And so specifically what that means is that the excess electricity shared to the grid from customer solar systems would be considered, quote, either a sale under the Public Utilities Regulatory Policies Act, or PURPA, subject to avoided cost pricing, or the customer essentially has to have a rate on file with FERC. In other words, they're regarding rooftop solar and a net metering transaction as a utility, as they would a utility. The avoided cost pricing would credit homeowners at a much lower rate for their excess energy, and what exactly that rate is unclear. And we'll say another word about that in a second. Again, to stress this other part, if a customer would have to have a rate on file with FERC, which would seem to be onerous, if not absurd, it would treat every residential solar system as an independent utility with all the paperwork that entails. Next slide, please. In effect, and this is a critical point, states would lose the right to set their own energy policies, which they've had control for a couple of generations now. And so I think some people are framing this fight and emphasizing this as a states' rights versus federal rights issue. And I think that's a very important part of this. It's not the only part of it, but clearly there are some people who are motivated to push back at this on states' rights grounds. As far as the changes in net metering, it's our view that the existing solar owners would have a broken promise, right? I think it's the metaphor here is rug ripped out from under them. People install, they make a substantial investment on solar systems, and they did so with the understanding that net metering policies would be in place. And changing the rules of the game is unfair. While this petition really is about existing net metering policies, it would obviously, or could obviously, have an impact on new installations. Next slide, please. So there are lots of questions about exactly what would be the ramifications if the federal government, through FERC, regulated net metering. Specifically, the petition says avoided cost is the new rate. It's not 100% clear what that would mean. Would every state have to go back to the drawing board? Would states be cut out entirely from this process? We're not sure, and our lawyers are not sure. There are issues about taxation that would be raised here. If homeowners are treated as utilities, then will they be taxed in a similar fashion? There are some thoughts that NEM may become a buy all, sell all system completely. We don't know whether there would be grandfathering for existing customers, as is often to happen when a state takes action on net metering. What will happen to net metering caps, interconnection limits, solar interconnection limits? Would they still be in force? Who knows? And then there's the impacts on community solar. How would community solar be impacted? This is super crucial part of the market, and we don't have an answer to that yet. Obviously, all this adds up with affecting the solar market, solar businesses, and solar jobs. Next slide, please. So we have NEM, I'm sorry, it's net energy metering. So that's the acronym we're using for net metering. So we are engaged in a national coalition to push back on the FERC petition, or the NERA petition. We have been encouraging, and you'll hear more about this in a moment from Liz, we've been encouraging all aspects of solar supporters to take action. Critically important right now has been the effort to get states to intervene in the FERC case. And this map shows from last week, but I don't think there's any significant changes to it since last week. it shows you which agencies in which states have intervened in the case. And we think it's very important that as many states as possible intervene and demonstrate that they want to protect their rights to tend to their own and formulate their own energy policies, which of course would include net metering. The PUCs are in blue, and so you see some states that you may not think would be supportive of this. And to tell you the truth, we're not 100% sure that all the states here that are intervening in opposition to the NERA petition. It's very possible that they are sympathetic to the goals of get rid of net metering, but they want to defend states' rights, and they would oppose it on that ground. An interesting part of this map is the striped states. Those are being represented by the National Association for Public Utilities, which have come out strongly. It's really the most prominent opposition or institutional opposition right now to the petition, and those states are being represented by their interests. So you can see there's a lot of gray on this map. And so what we want to do in the next couple of weeks is to fill up this map as much as possible. And that's on the state side. But we don't intend just to work on this from that side, as important as that is. We're also working on it from the grassroots side. And to talk about both of those efforts is my colleague, Liz Veazey. Liz, next slide.
Great, thanks, Glenn. Yeah, and so Solar United Neighbors has worked really closely with Vote Solar to launch this mini website for folks to take action, to make it easy for people to take action. And we've also been in consultation with Solar Energy Industry Association, or SEIA, around targeting. So we encourage folks to go to take action and share with your customers, savesolar.org, and one of us will put it in the chat. And then in Florida, we're, after a consultation with some other groups, there was concern about directly targeting the governor there. So there's a separate site for Florida that is the same, savesolar.org/act now. And so that doesn't go to the Florida governor, DeSantis, it just goes to FERC commissioners. So we wanted to make sure to point that out. What else was I gonna say? Oh, and we have a couple different ways people can take action. You can see two of them here. So for folks who power their home or business with solar, we have an action for those folks, so we can make sure and track that and highlight that. I work in the solar industry is an option, and solar supporters is an option. And then we also have another place for people who are solar company owners or leaders of solar companies. So you can see that and make sure to click on the right action for you. And so far we have worked hard with Vote Solar and other partners around the country to get this out. We've had 9,000 people take action, and we're working harder to get lots more to take action. You know, we sort of have a full court press now on Facebook ads and really pushing this out. I can share some social sharing images in the chat if you want access to those, and then I think I'll move us along. And so as installers and solar business people in the solar industry, you know, I think your stories are really important, and your advocacy around solar jobs and the opportunity for solar to help us, you know, to help strengthen local economies and help them grow coming out of this current pandemic and economic crisis. So you can email your governor via savesolar.org to protect states' rights to set their energy policy. And then in Florida, you know, we have that separate savesolar.org/act-now that'll just go to the FERC commissioners. And so if you can add in, you know, even a couple sentences about your business, the number of jobs you create, you know, what's at stake for your business, that would be really powerful, and we really encourage folks to do that. You can also write a letter to the editor of a local paper. And here at Solar United Neighbors, we held a webinar earlier this week, and we're working with some of our members to get out letters to the editor, and we've already had a couple published. So it'd be great to see more of those from solar businesses. And mobilizing your customers is another really big piece of things that you can do. So you can share the website, savesolar.org, or savesolar.org/act-now if you're in Florida. We will send a follow-up to everyone who registered for this webinar with a sample email that you could send to your customers. We could create a unique page with your company's logo. If you're interested in that, you know, let us know. You can reach out at getinvolved@solarunitedneighbors.org. You're also welcome to invite your customers to a webinar next week on Thursday, the 28th. We'll be getting more into the details of this petition, and that webinar is open to anyone. And we have guests from Vote Solar and the Energy and Policy Institute joining us. And I think we've already had 300 people register, so we're really excited about that opportunity for folks to connect and learn more. And let's see. Anya, I think I'm passing it back over to you, and then we'll wrap up and open up for questions.
Great. Thanks, Liz. I wanted to point out one thing, which is with all these submissions that we're going to get through the savesolar.org website, we will be bundling them up and submitting them to FERC. So it's a kind of, for the most part, it's a two-part action. When you go in and you submit your letter, for the most part, that letter is going to go to your governor, and you're going to be asking your governor to take action to protect your state solar rights. And then all the aggregate letters will be collected by us and gone through the complicated, cumbersome process of submitting them to FERC. And the deadline for getting it all done is June 15th. That's the very last day that they're taking comments. So it's a funny two-step process, but we're trying to make it easy. We're trying to make it easy for anyone to take action. You just click, customize the letter, and it goes in, and we take care of the rest. Or saying you send an email to your customers, they click, and that's all. So it's really about trying to make it easy for everyone to take action. So I just wanted to add that. That last slide is really just as a closing, do you mind going to the last slide? Is really just to remind, if you are from a solar company, I don't know exactly who's on this call. So we wanted to make sure that you knew about Solar United Neighbors generally and how we work with installers. And we have a new page on our website that's featured here, and it really talks about all the different ways that you can engage with us, from being on our list to receive RFPs for either co-ops or municipal solar or other kinds of projects, to working to promote your business through the National Solar Tour in October. And this year we're going to go digital. So we're going to be featuring installs for all sorts of, featuring, you know, little videos of installs all over the country. And then of course to the advocacy postcards. We've been running a I Love Solar postcard campaign to engage your elected officials in a very soft, nonpartisan way, to let them know you know, what the that all their customers, that all their constituents love solar and they should become solar. So there's a lot of different pieces, and we wanted to remind you to go to that. But I think what we'd really like to do is open now to Q&A and discussion. And I think we can unmute people, and so you can just speak up, or if you don't have audio or it's easier, write a comment in the chat and we'll just read it out loud and answer the question. That's what I was supposed to do, right, Glenn? So do we want to unmute everyone?
Let's see if I can figure out how to do that.
I think, well,
In the meanwhile, folks can just type in a question. Either, it doesn't really matter, you can use the chat function, the Q&A function. We'll get it either way. Here's a question. Is the petition written that net metering would change to avoid cost instead of retail rates? And the answer to that is explicitly yes. That's what that's what NERA is saying. Now, it's not 100% clear if that's going to be the case. What will FERC do with this argument? But yes, specifically in their petition, they are saying that.
Okay, and I think Anya or Glenn has allowed some folks to unmute themselves if you want to.
I'm trying, but it doesn't seem to work very well.
So again, while if we can or can't figure out the mute problem, please, we encourage people to type in their question. And it doesn't really have to be in a complete sentence either. You know, you can just put a phrase and question mark and we'll try to address it.
Someone asked for example, Julie asked for examples of letters to the editor. So I'm going to put a link to one in
great.
the
Thank
chat.
you. Yeah. One of the things that I might add, thank you for posting that, Liz. I want to add that we are really focusing on mobilizing existing solar customers, which is why it's so important that that if you could communicate to your customers and tell them about safesolar.org, we think that's going to be somewhat impactful to the FERC commissioners. The FERC's not used to getting a lot of interaction from the general public, or particularly with people who are directly impacted, financially impacted by policies they're discussing. And we think, well, 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 or 100 of those kinds of comments may not make much of an impact. We think thousands really will. Those individual stories are critically important to convey to the FERC commissioners that there is a lot at stake, and what we want them to do, just to be clear, what we want FERC to do is to decline to take up the petition. We don't want them to be discussing this at this time. There are a lot of people who are making the point that this is the worst time to be talking about limiting solar during the pandemic and when the economic free fall. And I've seen quite a few messages to that effect, that this is the absolute wrong time for them to bring up this issue.
I'm wondering if there's anyone on this webinar that is planning to take action or planning to send a notice to their customers, or they might let people know about what they're doing or what's the challenge for them.
And I think everyone should be able to unmute yourselves now if you would like to. And
yeah, hi.
Hi.
Hi, yeah, I am Athena Bowerly. I'm with a local installer out in Eastern PA, and we're with Solarize Philly, so I'm definitely gonna let them know. And we have a whole, hundreds of systems that, that we've installed for our customers. So we'll let them know about that link and some, easy clicking they can do to support this. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for taking action.
There is a question from Alex, what is normal policy process for this? Just public comment to FERC. So the normal interaction that FERC has, it's really, they sort of sit like judges and adjudicate and hear from lawyers that represent organizations and institutions, utilities, nonprofits like us. and they make their decisions. They do have public comment. They're obviously a government function. It's important that people take advantage of it. Our strategy is to do grass tops work as well as grassroots. That's why we're focusing so much on getting governors and attorneys general to intervene in the case. We don't think just one alone is going to be enough to prevail here. We want to make sure we're mobilizing both state agencies, state governments, as well as solar homeowners and solar businesses.
And yeah, we heard from Julie Jones. She's sending to their customers in their newsletter, posting on social media. Awesome. Thank you, Julie. Anybody else want to share or have a question?
There's somebody who's called in, and I don't know whether or not you're trying to speak. But you're unmuted, so if you'd like to speak. It's the 813 number. If you're speaking, we can't hear you.
I guess they don't want to say anything.
Okay, that's fine.
One of the things I wanted to emphasize is if you are sending out doing social media or sending out an email, feel free to reach out if you'd like some of the graphics that we produced or draft text or anything. We're trying to make this as easy for people as possible to take action. So anything we can do to make it easier for you.
Julie just asked to post the link to the webinar next week for solar homeowners. And Liz will be posting that in a moment. Strongly encourage you to not only ask your customers to go to savesolar.org, but also to invite them to this webinar to learn more. On that webinar, we'll just go much more into detail on what solar homeowners can do. I think as we mentioned, our partner Vote Solar will have a speaker who can answer a lot of the more technical regulatory questions in plain English. And also we'll have somebody from the Energy and Policy Institute to talk about their research on who the shadowy group NERA is. Are there any other questions, concerns?
I guess we can give people a couple minutes, but if not, we can give them back a couple of minutes on their Friday before Memorial Day, which I guess everybody will appreciate.
Yep.
Thank you so much for joining. I see some people are saying thank you for letting them know about it. We really appreciate people taking time out. I know it's a busy time of the year, even if you are stuck in the pandemic situation, people are busy, it's a long weekend. I hope everyone gets some rest this weekend and stays healthy and safe. And please don't hesitate to reach out. The best way, what's the best way, Liz, for them to reach out by email? Is it the get involved, or how do we want to do that?
Glenn, get involved.
Yeah, get involved works fine. Get involved at solarunitedneighbors.org will work fine. It'll get to us and we'll be sure to follow up. We have a whole team of people to help with this. Also, you can expect an email from everyone who registered. We'll follow up with the information, the links that we've been posting in the chat to have it a handy way for you to refer to it. And we really appreciate you taking the time to find out more about this threat and to take action. Thank you very much.